we'll see how this works out. Welcome, we're making pie crust today. Very simple recipe. We'll walk through it, you don't need to write this down. All it has in it is butter, a little bit of salt. I'm using sea salt, but you can use any salt really. And just unbleached white flour. And some cold water. I just make a little thing of ice water to put in. And we're going to do this old school. We're not going to use a food processor. We're just going to use a pastry cutter, a pastry blender. And this is an old school one. It's a wire style. I don't like the blades. I like the wire style. It's got a wooden handle. It's got a steel bolt that goes all the way through, so it's really nice and sturdy. And the wires, instead of being welded in, they butt into a piece of steel and they're crimped. And this is really durable. This is years old, and it's a reliable tool. So the first thing we're going to do is measure in our flour. 1 1/4 cups. Some people like to measure instead of by weight, but I'm just going to do it by cups because you might not have a gram scale. Just like I'm not using a food processor today, because you might not have a food processor. And you don't want to pack the flour in, but you want to make sure that you don't have any air pockets. So when you scoop a cup up, you know, cut through it with a knife a couple times. There's 1 cup. Here's a 1/4 cup. That's our flour. Put the lid back on there just loosely because we put a little flour on the counter later to pat the dough out. 1/4 teaspoon. So that was a 1 1/4 cups of white flour. 1/4 teaspoon of salt. We could sift this together, but you don't have to. Just take your pastry blender and spread that salt around a little bit. That'll be fine. And same thing, we could measure this, we could do all sorts of fancy things, but I use Plura, by the way. This is a European high fat. You could use Kelly. There's several good brands. This just happens to be what I use. And they got tablespoon markers right on here. Are they perfect? No. No. But they're close enough. Look at that. That foil always sticks. It's a pain in the butt. There's my measures. So I just line the nearest tablespoon marker up there. We need 10 tablespoons. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So that's close enough right there. And we can't just put this in as a lump, right? Because I won't be able to pastry blend it. So we're going to cut this up into basically pats of butter. Cut off a slice and I cut it into thirds. And I just toss it in the flour. That one I got a little thin. No big deal. You don't have to be perfect here. And you can see from the volumes here, this is about half butter and half flour. I mean, it's not that much different. So your crust is a very buttery crust. Now we're going to cut this in with a pastry cutter. And the reason, what we have to do is we have to get the butter broken up, but we also have to incorporate it with the flour, because what happens when you add the water to the flour, it would form gluten, would form, you know, threads, basically give the dough structure. But the thing is, if you didn't have any fat in there, it would turn into a brick. You wouldn't be able to eat it when it was cooked. And by incorporating the fat into it first, I'm going to wash my hands real quick. By incorporating the fat into it, what it does is it controls how much the water gets access to the wheat in the flour, and it controls how the gluten develops. So I'm just going to press this down. And these are just wires. We're not going to bend them, right? We're not going to lean on it so hard that we bend anything. We're just going to press it into the butter, and you're going to see the butter is going to lump up. It's no big deal. We're going to press it in. And we're just going to shove it off. No big deal. This is easy. You're going to get messy making pie. That's just the way it is. And we're going to press it in. And we're going to just keep doing this until we've basically broken up the biggest pieces of butter we want to be like maybe pea-sized or smaller. And what you're doing when you do that is you're minimizing the lumps of butter that will be in the crust, which is important, but you're also minimizing the amount of flour that gets nakedly exposed to the water when we add the water later. Now you don't want to handle this too much because you don't want to melt the butter with your body temperature. Butter, you should start out, it doesn't have to be frozen, that would be bad, but it has to be cold. And you can see the texture here. These are still too big, the pieces, but you can see the butter's breaking up and how it's all just blended in with the flour. And that's what people call this. It's a wire pastry blender. You should be able to find a good solid wood one with like I said, I like this one because it's wood and it's got a bolt that goes all the way through that's steel. So you know it's durable. I don't like the ones with the formed blades. I like a wire one because the blades, they're usually not enough blades. They're too heavy thickness. It's hard to get the butter to really break up. I like a wire blender. If I was left-handed, I would switch arms because I would equalize my muscle development. Because this is a workout, don't let anybody kid you. If you make 4 or 5 pies on a holiday, you're going to feel that burn the next day. You're going to need to sweep the bowl like this occasionally to get the flour off the bottom. But there we go. This is all broken up. Pretty much pea-sized or smaller. Like, it won't be smooth. It's going to be lumpy. But as far as the actual butter chunks, everything in here is pea-sized or smaller. You can see right there. Right. Now we're going to put in 2 to 4 tablespoons. You can go as much as 5, but it's risky. So the more water you put in, the easier it is to roll out later. But it'll also toughen up the crust. And we're just going to blend it in with a fork. So we're going to sprinkle 1 tablespoon over the top. And we're just going to fold the flour and butter around into it, a little bit like that. Drag up some from the bottom. Put in another tablespoon. Fold it in. Fork. Pull it from the bottom. Oh, a little bit of a mess there on the floor. We won't miss that when we're rolling it out. Another tablespoon. They say 2 to 4. You're never going to get a rollable crust with only 2. You're going to use the all 4. And I don't think it toughens it up horribly putting in 5. You can see it's starting to glom together now, starting to stick, which is good. Here's our 4th one. Depending on how this feels, I might go for 5. In a food processor, you would definitely only do 4. Because it gets a lot more activity on the flour, it develops more gluten. I'm gonna go for the 5th one because I know it'll be easier to roll out later. and it's starting to form lumps now. So what we're going to do, yep, the dough is starting to pull together. And we're gonna just form this up into a ball. You could do it on the counter on a floured surface, but I'm just gonna form this up right in the bowl. Generate less of a mess for myself. And you can see how that packed right up once I got enough water in. So I went 5 tablespoons, even though the recipe says 2 to 4. With a food processor, 5 will maybe toughen it up, but when you're doing it with a fork, you can safely do 5. Okay. And then I gotta do one more thing that I forgot to get out. I need to roll plastic wrap. I won't say a brand name. After you make this dough, you've got it pounded out in a circle like that. You need to refrigerate it for at least an hour. And it can be refrigerated up to 2 days. So you can make these crusts in advance of actually making your pies. And they'll sit in the refrigerator just fine for up to 2 days. So we just lift this out. We squeeze it out into a disc so it'll be easier to roll when we take it out of the fridge. And that's it. We're gonna put that in the fridge, and that's our basic butter. You can see the lumps of butter in here, and that's fine. That's a butter pie crust. We're gonna roll this out. It's gotta sit for at least an hour. And then we'll roll it out and we'll make a pie.